back to another episode of Standard Cats. Today we're going to take a look at Selesnya Cats. So, Selesnya Cats are actually pretty fun to play, and they can actually be a little bit competitive with the right amount of cards. Now, because I'm trying to make it competitive, it's not going to be the most budget deck, but you will see a couple of this, cards in this deck, especially a big chunk, is going to be less than $25. So, first off, let's jump right into it. First off, we're going to play 3 copies of Sacred Cat. Now, he's just a really good solid turn 1 because he's just a 1/1 for 1 mana that has lifelink, and he can come back later in the game with Embalm. So nothing else that needs to be said about him. Next up is Long Tusk Cub. The reason we run him is because we do run a couple of energy sources in this deck, and he's just a solid turn 2 that can get bigger. I mean, if you swing with him with Trample, his deck just gets bigger. He's just a 3/3, next turn he's a 4/4, and then as you'll see later in the game, he'll be like a 4/4. People don't really want to block that, so he'll just get even bigger, and he'll just pump out more damage. Next up, we're gonna run two copies of Servant of the Conduit. The reason we run this is mostly because of Long Tusk Cub. So if we don't really need the mana, we can just have a solid 2/2 blocker and a 3/3 by turn 3. I know that's a lot to think about, but the reason we run this at 2 is because you don't really want to see more than just 1 copy of him in your hand, especially because there's better cards in this deck to run. So 2 is good. I could see it being run at 3 if you really want, but 4 is just way too much, because you're going to start seeing turn 2 Servant of the Conduit, turn 3 Servant of the Conduit, and then that's all you have. You just have lands and fucking mana dorks. You can't really do shit with that. So 2 is fine. Next up, we run 3 copies of Adorn Pouncer. This motherfucker is one of the key factors in this deck because he swings in with Double Strike. What we do in this deck, if you haven't noticed already, is we want to make our creatures fucking huge, and we want to swing in for tons of damage. So with the Adorn Pouncer, he pretty much fills that role. You want to pump him up with a couple of pump spells and lords, and he swings in for like 10 with Double Strike, and then they just die if they don't block it. 10 with Double Strike and Trample most of the time. Most of the time we'll have a couple of cards that can give him Trample. So Adorn Pouncer is just a really good card to play in this deck. Next up, we're playing Metallic Mimic. Right off the bat, you can see why we would run him. I mean, we already have 3 key targets in this deck that would be very, very viable with him on the board. And that's just thinking if there's just one. Even if there's just one, this can be a 2/2 with lifelink, a 3/3 that can get bigger, and then a 2/2 with Double Strike. I mean, this card is just amazing to have on the board. I mean, with more than 1 copy of him, things get even bigger, and he doesn't even need to swing. I like the fact that he just sort of just sits there, and he can just play a key role in the deck without really having to spend anything more than 2 mana. Apart from that, because you are running 2 colors in this deck, this is actually more viable because you don't need to specify in what color you're running for him, because he's just 2 of any color. So next up, we're going to run 2 Initiate's Companion. The reason we run this card is because of his effect. Now, I don't know if a lot of people know what he does, but basically, he's a 2 mana 3/1 that when he deals combat damage, he can untap another creature or a land that you control. So pretty much the only reason we run this card is because we're also running 4 copies of Pride Sovereign, and what Pride Sovereign likes to do is exert himself. So you don't really want to have just 2/1s and an exerted fucking 4/4. You want to be able to have him out on the board and have him tapped whenever, or have an untap whenever you want. So he pretty much fulfills that role. Originally, I was gonna have Prepare to Fight in this deck because this can do that for 2 mana at instant speed, but I ended up going with Initiate's Companion more, or I started leaning more towards this because he's a 3/1 body. So with something like Metallic Mimic, he can come in and he's now a 4/2, and that just seems pretty well to me, especially because you're only paying 2 mana for him, and he has a pretty decent effect. So you only run him at 2 because that's all you need. You don't need more than one of him on the board, and that's all you want to see in one match. And obviously we played 4 copies of Pride Sovereign because he's just amazing in this deck. They pretty much made this cat as good as he could be. I mean, he just gets huge. I mean, only having 2 of him on the board can pump out creatures and have him swing for like 5 damage. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't run this at 4. You want to see this in your hand as much as you can, as much as you want. Next up is 2 Ronuses. I mean, he's just an amazing card. Now you see, this is why we run Longtusk Cub, Pride Sovereign, and even Initiate's Companion with the Metallic Mimic counter on it. You want to have your creatures get big so you can swing in for like 10 damage with Ronus. He's just an amazing card to play. I mean, he's a 3-drop, Death Touch, indestructible. They can beef up your other creatures with this secondary effect. You run this at 2 because he is legendary and he's really hard to remove from game, especially right now, because most removal is going to be a 4-drop and there's just better targets to remove in this deck than Ronus. So 2 because he's just going to stay on the board most of the time, and you don't want to draw into more than one of him because he is legendary, so that kind of sucks. Next up is going to be 2 Regal Carcal. You run this because he's just an amazing 5-drop bomb. You only run it at 2 because you don't want to see more than one of him in the game or in your hand, especially if you draw your 7. You don't want to have 1 Regal Carcal in your hand and then draw into another one. He's just a really good bomb to have by turn 5 that can really swing the game over for you, because the reason at this high cost in Standard, you want to have your cards make a big difference if you're spending that much mana for a creature or a spell. So, yeah, you only run it at 2 because that's all you want to see, and that's all that needs to be said. So next up is 4 Blossoming Defense, mostly because there's a lot of key targets in this deck that you don't want to see removed, especially Metallic Mimic. But there's also, I mean, Pride Sovereign, because I've had games where the turn that I cast Metallic Mimic, they fucking kill it. So what you want to do is you want to do turn 2, cast some other cat, and then turn 3, Metallic Mimic with 1 open forest in your hand, or in your board, and then tap this. They miss their trigger, and your Metallic Mimic is still safe. So yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't run more than, any less than 4 for Blossoming Defense, because it's just a really good 1-drop. Next up, you're gonna play 2 Tomb with Aether, 2 because it's a good card to have in your hand when you draw your 7. It's kind of a lifesaver if you don't have a plains or a forest when you open up your hand, and it actually beefs up Longtusk Cub, so I don't see why you wouldn't run it at 2. You could see it running it at 3 if your land base is kind of a problem, but considering how low the curve is on this deck, this is all you need to run it at. Next up, you're gonna play 3 Appeals. Appeal to Authority. The reason we run this card is because it's actually pretty fucking good. So what you already want to do in this deck is swarm your board, and what Appeal does is it gives a creature X and trample, where X is the number of creatures on your field. So with something like Adorned Pouncer or fucking Ronus, you're swinging in with trample and XX power for 1 fucking mana, so it's really cost effective. And it also has a secondary effect which you kind of don't really use a lot, but it taps 2 creatures and it gives your creatures vigilance until end of turn. So it's actually pretty decent to have as a secondary effect, especially because this is sort of a better version of Larger Than Life. So yeah, 3. You run this at 3 because you don't want to see more than 2 of it in your hand. Running into pump spells casting pump spells is good, but if you run a lot of it, that's all you're gonna draw into, and that's gonna suck for you if you don't have any fucking creatures in your hand or any on your board. Next up, you want to run 2 larger than life. The reason we run this is because appeal is good, but it's not good in the early game because your board isn't going to be as big as you want it to be. Larger than life pretty much helps you jump that gap, because for 2 mana, it gives your creature 4/4 and trample. You cast this on turn 3 with Dorn Pouncer on the board. He swings in for 5 with Double Strike and trample, and your opponent is down to 10 life. Fuck. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so next up is gonna be 2 copies of Dust to Dawn. You run this because you like most of your creatures by turn 4 they're gonna be around 2 or less power, and the rest that do actually get killed, you can actually recur back to your hand with Dawn. So this is really good, especially with creatures that have died before Dusk was actually cast. Something like Metallic Mimic, or even something like Pride Sovereign, which is actually a 2/2 in its base power. You can bring it back to your hand for 5 mana, so this is a pretty decent card to run in this deck. Next up is 2 Authority of Councils, because by turn 3, you kind of do this thing where if you have a Dorn Pouncer, and then they cast something, or they cast a creature, it comes in tapped, and then you fucking cast Larger Than Life, and that's when your damage is gonna kick in. So it's actually gonna land to your opponent straight up without any blockers. So with the Authority of Consoles, it's actually really good against just mono red aggro, and just decks that like to pump out tokens or creatures, especially right now with vampire tokens. You just get a bunch of life because they like swarming the board, but you're gonna pretty much stop them and gain life off of it. Next up is 1 Growing Rights, mostly because I don't have a second copy, but just the fact that just running 1 is pretty decent. I mean, the turn that it comes out, you can search for a creature, and then you also get a Gaia's Cradle later in the game, so this helps you ramp out. I don't see why you wouldn't run this at least 1 in this deck. If I had another one, of course I would run it, but right now I don't. So yeah, and I actually can't find space for it in this deck because we're running a pretty crammed 60 card deck, which is the base minimum. But yeah, so 1 Growing Rights for now. Next up, you do 2 Anointed Possession, mostly because you're gonna ramp out with this. Sorry about that, you guys. I had a couple of technical difficulties, but let's go ahead and finish up this video before my mom yells at me again.
What the fuck are you doing?
So, Anointed Procession, you want to run because you have 4 sources that create tokens, and you're running multiples of each. So it's just a really good card to have in your deck. I mean, it's just pretty much a win more. With Anointed Pouncer, a Dorn Pouncer, you make 2 4/4s with Double Strike. With Sacred Cat, you make 2 1/1s with Lifelink, and then with Pride and Regal Cargo, you're making 4 1/1s with Lifelink. And that's just if you have 1 of them on the board. If you have 2, then that's double that. As far as land base goes, you're running 4 of the cycle because you like cycling through your deck in the late game, and this is a pretty good option in early game. Then you're gonna do 4 Aether Hubs because you already run the energy engine, so it's just good to have it for mana fixing. Then you're gonna do 8 Forests because you're running mostly green sources, and then you're gonna run, obviously here's the and then you're gonna run 6 planes because you don't need that many planes, and with green you do mana fixing with Attune with Aether or Serving the Conduit. And let's go into the sideboard. You're gonna run 2 Settle the Wreckage because against aggro it's really good. Cast out for interaction. 1 Adorn Pouncer. If there's not a lot of removal, you're gonna go ahead and run into 4 Adorn Pouncers, and this is pretty much gonna win you the game. 1 Serve on the Conduit if you're racing for mana, and also if you're running Bristling Hydra, because if you're running against a lot of removal, then this is pretty good, especially with Serve on the Conduit. And then 3 Prowling Separate card. A really, really good card, but it has to be in the side deck just because of what it does. It's a 4/3 for 3 mana, and that's amazing, but it's only a good card against blue. And then you're gonna do 3 Appetite for the Unnatural. If you're going against enchantments or artifacts, this is pretty much your best card in green. And then for the last card, you do 1 Authority of the Consuls, and that's if you're going against red. You're gonna go ahead and run 3 copies of Authority of the Consuls just so you can draw into it early, and you're gonna pretty much win off of that because of the coming in tapped, you're getting life, and you're just swinging for game. Alright, thank you for watching my video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a lovely rest of your night. Take care. Like, comment, and subscribe. And
peace
suck my
out.
dick. Thank you.
Peace out. Peace out.